We actually have a lot of reveals with this demo, which is kind of fun. There's a lot of stuff that the kids have been speculating about on the forums that we get to talk about today. We're revealing pretty much the whole feats tree. We're letting people play this with a good amount of dark essence so that they can spend on any one of the 4 branches of the feats tree and go all the way to the end of it. So that's a big thing. Narratively, we're revealing sort of 2 things. First, what leads Jackie into the trap. We saw him in a previous demo being crucified by a crippled man and interrogated while he was demanding, "Give me the darkness." So we see what leads into that narratively. We also reveal that Jenny, coming back from the first game, has been captured. That her soul is under the control of the darkness, and that he is holding her hostage until Jackie does what the darkness wants him to do. In this demo, you see that you can play as the Darkling, and you go into his eyes and use his vision, and can get to places that Jackie can't get to. In this demo, you crawl through a bunch of kind of air ducts to get a door open that Jackie can't get through without the Darkling cutting the power. Yeah, the first game was awesome for when it came out early in the console cycle. It was one of the things we were pushing for, like as an industry at the time, like realism, makes everything look real, make it look like real life, and they did a really, really excellent job at that point. When we were working on this game in pre-production, we were going back and forth at Digital Extremes talking about how do we make it look fresh, how do we make it look right for the story that we want to tell. And I think that one of the things that at 2K we do really well is, take risks on something that we think is awesome. And this art style is one of the things that we really we worked with Digital Extremes very closely and sort of said, what is the right way to tell the story that we want to tell? And we're kind of looking for the visual inspiration for that. And everybody had Silvestri's work. We had Darkness comics all over the place. We're flipping through the books going like, why don't we make it look like this? This is awesome. All of the really dark and black and really, really dark gray that's close to black and really high contrast and really bright pops of color. And it's not something that we'd seen in games before, anything that looked exactly like a graphic noir style. And so we pushed for it. And it took a little while to get there. But then, it was born a little bit before the first demo, the graphic noir style. All the textures are hand-painted so that you can get that kind of pen shader hatching to show depth on the objects. And the colors are really, really bright pops against a dark, contrasty background. It was the right way for us to visually represent what we wanted to tell.
Now, it seemed also obviously very important for you guys to maintain a sense of continuity by keeping the same author. Let's maybe go more into that.
Well, the first story from the first game was amazing. Like, the narrative was great. And that was one of the core pillars of this game from the get-go, was, in supportive story. Like, everything that we're doing in supportive story. So keeping with the same writer was a really critical thing, because Paul pulled some really weird stuff in the first game that was very risky, like being able to sit on the sofa with your girlfriend and watch a movie, the whole movie. And then the player has to opt out. The player has to say, I would like to move on to the next section now. That was something that hadn't been done before. Watching Jenny be killed right in front of you. I should have said spoiler alert before that, but
it's okay.
But watching Jenny be killed was an incredibly powerful scene. And not the type of thing you typically see in games. So we wanted to keep that sort of fresh, daring narrative. And so keeping Paul on board to push that really daring narrative and keeping everyone on the development team focused on the story was really critical for us.
Would you say that there is something in Darkness 2 that's sort of the equivalent of that sort of that really nuanced, like, emotional draw you have by having, that couch scene, but in a totally different way?
It's in a totally different way. But yes, I think that we're making as many decisions on this game that are just as interesting and just as daring as we did in the first game. We haven't really given away much of that yet. I think that the restaurant scene that the game opens up with is one that is that's sort of a similar storytelling technique, like a similar interesting storytelling technique. I think that's the only one of these that we've really shown off to anybody so far. But it is, all of the decisions that we made were in service of story. I mean, the gameplay has to be amazing as well, but the proof will be in playing for that. We're really confident in that as well. But there were a lot of scenes that we put in this game specifically to make sure that it was kind of a showstopper for people who cared about the narrative.
Will there be like a new set of like full-length movies on the TVs?
That is something that we're not making any comments about right
Okay.
now. Probably the two core pillars that we're talking about in this set of demos that we're showing off today are in service of story. The narrative is amazing. Maybe there's three. In service of story, graphic noir as an art style is a really strong decision, and it's one of the things that we think. You look at any screenshot from this game, and you will know what game it came from. And as you play the game, the visual style of graphic noir feels right for the gameplay and for the story. And quad wielding is one of the things that we started with way back in pre-production, looking at those demon arms from the first game, and near the end of the first game, there's right when you're at the pinnacle of your power, you're going against Polly's men, and it's this huge mansion filled with dudes all shooting at you, and there's a few cinematic moments where the demon arms just go wild, and they're biting people's heads off, and they're slicing people in half. But it was a passive moment, it was a cinematic. And in the beginning of this game's development, we said, I want to make that under my control. If you guys can be helpful, I want you helpful at every point in time in combat. I want to be able to control all of that, biting people's heads off and slicing them in half. So that's where quad wielding was born, where you get full control over the demon arm and how it slashes, and the demon arm that grabs, the grabbing demon arm, and what it can pick up, and throwing people and throwing things at dudes. So quad wielding as a gameplay mechanic was absolutely a core pillar. So quad wielding, graphic noir, in service of story.
How has the development been in the quad wielding? I mean, I know you made some reference towards like playtesting and all that.
Well, it's one gun can be hard enough. Two guns was really revolutionary when we first did that, and so we wanted to make sure that it felt really natural when you give the player 4 weapons. So that just takes doing it, testing it, making sure that it feels right, taking anything that doesn't feel exactly right, like exactly intuitive, and then kind of iterating on that again. And we've seen we take the playable code to a bunch of shows. We've taken it to PAX, we've taken it to a bunch of Comic-Cons, and people really get it really quickly. And I think that one of the reasons that it's really easy to use these 4 weapons simultaneously is because we've cared very deeply about that being intuitive for well over 2 years now, and just constantly testing it and constantly making little minor tweaks to make it feel just right. One of the things that makes it easy to play with quad wielding is that the controller for when you're using a controller, not a keyboard and mouse, but when you're using a controller, it maps directly to how your brain would process what's on screen. Because on the screen, you've got 2 guns and 2 demon arms. And that maps to, on your hands, you've got 2 bumpers and 2 triggers. So the triggers fire the guns on the lower left and right, and then the bumpers use the demon arms on the top left and right, and it sort of visually represents kind of where your fingers are on the controller. And that makes it really easy for people to remember which ones go where. And so people find themselves just using the demon arms as if they've always had them in every game pretty quickly,
Nice.
because it's just really well tested. So Darkness 2 comes out February 7th in the US, February 10th international. Everybody should go out and get it so that they can quad wield and use 4 weapons at the same time while experiencing one of the best stories they'll ever see in a game.